Hi, I'm Dan Schmitt. I do a weekly television show called Team Chicago Challenge. The website for the TV show is teamchicago.tv. Also in 2012, I was a candidate for Congress in the 5th Congressional District. I didn't win the race, I didn't raise enough funds, but one thing I did learn is a lot of people out there, because I went to a lot of fairs, a lot of smart people, but they listen to the media, they believe people like Gore. And just the other day, the Senate had a pajama party. Can you imagine they stayed in the Senate overnight to talk about global warming? What really gets me is you keep hearing these people, and it's not just President Obama, it's not just everybody, the Democrats in the Senate, it's all the media in America, it's the BBC in England, it's half the countries in Europe. And the trouble is, and people I talk to, is they don't have any historic perspective. So I'm going to show you a map, and I'm going to explain a little bit about history, and maybe you'll understand where I'm coming from when I say there is no global warming. And this past winter proves it beyond a shadow of a doubt. So let's draw the Earth looking at the North Pole. Best way to do that is using a piece of string. Put the pen on one side, mark your center, and you can draw your globe. So let's say this is the North Pole. Now one thing we got to understand about the North Pole, there's nothing there except water and ice the majority of the time. This is Greenland. Big island, goes it past the Arctic Circle. And then this is Alaska over here, comes into Canada, got some islands up here, got the Hudson Bay all the way down, Nova Scotia. This is all part of Canada with Hudson Bay. Greenland, Europe. This is Scandinavia. This goes over into Russia. Barely touches the Arctic Circle, goes all the way over to the farthest point of Siberia. This is the Bering Sea right here. 50 miles. It's only 50 miles separating Alaska, the United States of America, from Russia. So when Sarah Palin said you can see the Soviet Union from Alaska, she was 100% right. Because if you're over in Gary, or if you're over in Michigan at the beach, you can look over and you see Chicago. On a clear day, you can see the buildings downtown Chicago. This last winter, and they keep coming up with this Arctic vortex, or whatever they want to call it. The reality is, we're back to normal winters. That's the problem with these idiots in the Senate. And I'm telling you, Chucky Schumer, who's that guy from Massachusetts? And the young guy out of New Jersey, the new senator that made a remark that when he took his first road trip, he drove to Hawaii. Can't drive to Hawaii, unless you can float on the ocean. But anyhow, this past winter, the ice that was formed, because like I said, the North Pole is just water. It's just ice. There are times, and I'm going to show you a picture, in 1956 or 58, when we built our first nuclear submarines, they broke through the ice in 1956 right at the North Pole, and there's open water still. So this whole area is ice, and it's not ice, and it's ice, and it's not ice. And sometimes the ice is 2 feet thick, sometimes the ice is 15 feet thick. It doesn't get much more than 30 feet thick anywhere. But this past winter, we had ice all the way here, all the shoreline. So all the polar bears were fine. This is all iced in. All the way, all Hudson Bay. All the way down over here. Down over here is where we got Lake Superior iced over. Down here we got Lake Michigan iced over. All ice. We've had ice coverage in the Chicago area for the last 90 days. This is normal. We're going back to normal. The problem we have with these so-called smart people, and it all starts with Al Gore. Al Gore is the one that promoted this. Al Gore's made a lot of money. This whole carbon trading thing, this making every time you breathe out, that's a pollutant. Every time you breathe out, that's a global warming gas. That's a heat-seeking gas. Every time you breathe out, I mean, give me a break. They have created a panic. Europe, the BBC, 90% of the news media in America, even guys like Bill O'Reilly, who sort of pretends to be conservative, he thinks there's global warming. There's no global warming. And the reason is, what I'm saying is, they have no sense of history. These so-called smart people have no sense of history. I mean, in the original Ice Age, which was thousands and thousands of years ago, all of this was covered with ice. Half of the earth was covered with ice, all the way down to Arkansas and North Carolina was covered with ice. Then, and this is now where we can talk some real, actual history. Like I was saying, this is Greenland. Greenland is not that far from North America. This is Iceland. Do you know, in the 9th century, this is fact, Eric the Red, who was the father of Leif Erikson, the first Norseman or the first Viking that might have come to North America, which is not that big of a stretch, because this is Greenland. To get to North America, to get to Canada, is not really that far. And if you go from the fatherland, Denmark, which was here, to Iceland, then you go to Greenland. Well, Eric the Red had a farm in the 9th century. So Greenland generally is covered with 100 to 200 feet of ice all the time now. Well, back then, he had a farm. He was farming in Greenland, raising pigs, raising cattle, raising crop, exporting beef and pork back to the fatherland, back here to Denmark. And this was a normal trade. So back then, what was the North Pole in the 9th century? It could have been all water. There could have been no ice up here in the 9th century. But there's no historical facts on that. And then there was a mini ice age. How many people, and where icing began, they're talking about between 1550 and 1850 is called the mini ice age. There was a big cold time during the 1650s, the 1770s, which might have been part of where the Revolutionary War came from, and even into 1850, there were mini ice ages. The Thames River in England froze over. You could walk across the Thames River. Well, England generally is at very temperate conditions. Generally, they're in the 50s and 60s, and the Thames River probably hasn't froze for 200 years. But during this time, there's been many ice ages. There's been warming. There's been cooling. So what we're in right now has nothing to do with global warming. What is global warming? Because it's a little bit warmer. And here's my main question. Seeing President Obama has said the debate is over, here's my main question for President Obama. Tell me, President Obama, what is the normal range the temperature should be in America? What should it be in the rest of the world? All this fantasy you talk about. We talk about the oceans will rise. I'm sorry, President Obama. You have been lying to the public. This is another one of your big lies promoting global warming, saying the argument is over, the debate is over, the morons in the Senate. Who do you want to talk about? Harry Reid? Chucky Schumer? The young senator out of New Jersey? I'll argue with any of them. I will debate anybody, any place, any time about global warming because they're all wrong. And you know, I have a little knowledge of ice. I've been around ice. I know what freezing is. This year, there's been more ice on the lakes in Wisconsin, northern Illinois, than there's been in the last 20 years. and when we were up racing this year, there was 20 inches of ice on Lake Winnebago. There was 18 inches of ice on Wallace Lake. We are back to normal winters. When I was promoting ice racing at the Mineola Hotel from 77 to 87, there was winters we had 10, 12 inches of ice. Some winters we had 18 inches of ice. Some winters we only had 6 and 7 inches of ice. So don't tell me global warming, and don't threaten to raise my taxes, forcing fuel up because of some goofy idea called global warming. So that's what I got to say about global warming. You want to debate me? My website is walkwithdan.com. That's my political website, walkwithdan.com. My motorcycle website is teamchicago.tv. You want to send me an email? My email is teamdan45@gmail.com. But I will debate anybody. Don't tell me the majority of the scientists believe in global warming. That's not true. And let me point out one other thing about global warming, just to let you people know that I'm pretty smart when it comes to history and the world. We're looking at the North Pole here. Well, let me draw you a little picture of the South Pole. So let's say this is the Earth, and this is the South Pole, right? Do you know that the ice at the South Pole, and this is even debatable, but when they land airplanes at the South Pole, they set, and I've read two different statistics, and that's one book said it was 5,200 feet, and another reading I read said it was 7,000 feet. At South Pole, where we have, the United States has a station right at South Pole. Rebuilding and putting it on stilts because even there, the ice can get 200 feet, 50 feet, add on, subtract. 1 mile, over 1 mile of ice at the South Pole. So, and what about those global warming people looking at the ice in Antarctica with their cruise ship? I want to see the pictures of that cruise ship 2 years from now and 5 years from now when it's crushed by the ice. And let me point out one other thing. Everybody talks about oil and the North Pole. And they keep looking at this region here, which is part of Canada. Would they be drilling? Well, this year, if you would have put any drill rigs in any of these areas north of Alaska all the way over to Greenland, they would have been crushed by the ice. There won't be any drill rigs in this area. Now, the Russian area, there are areas where ice does not go all the way to the land. And the Russians have huge icebreakers, and they do move freight around to these northern ports with these huge icebreakers. And then the other thing people talk about is the Northwest Passage. So let me tell you a little bit about that. As you can see from this map, the Northwest Passage would be over North America. So stuff coming out of New York or Europe could go this way over here to Asia. Now that's a pretty short route if you could do it, but you can't do it. And it's not going to happen because now I believe we're back into normal icing. This area, the Soviet area, the Russian area, that doesn't ice up, but when you look at the distance here to go from Asia over to Europe, it's almost unbelievably the amount of distance. It's basically better to go through the Suez Canal. So the idea of drilling, I imagine you could do some little drilling on the Russian side because there is more open water. But on this side, only a fool would think of setting up some kind of drilling rig that would not be crushed by the ice. That's how the ice is there. It's more of an act of God than it is an act of humans. We are just 6 billion, 7 billion people on the face of the earth. We cannot control the weather. We never could. We haven't affected it. And like I said, I'll debate anybody, anytime, any place. We're back to normal winter. Enjoy. Thank you for watching.